Have you ever wondered what you would do if the very existence of your child was denied erased, not because of truth, but because of power? This is the story of a young black maid who carried a child into the world only to face rejection from the billionaire who fathered him. He thought his fortune could bury the truth. She was left with a choice: stay silent and protect herself from humiliation, or stand tall and fight for her baby's dignity in a world that told her she didn't belong. Now imagine it's you. Imagine holding your child, knowing their eyes reflect a truth no one else will claim. Would you find the courage to step into the storm, to endure the whispers, the judgment, and the loneliness for the sake of the one who cannot yet speak? This is not just her battle. It is a story for every person who has ever been silenced, dismissed, or forced to choose between comfort and justice. Join us, and let this story stir something deep within you. If it touches your heart, please like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to our channel so you won't miss the journey ahead. The Holtson estate rose above the quiet slopes of East Hampton like a fortress of glass and steel. From the outside, it looked untouchable. White marble columns caught the afternoon sun, and long manicured driveways led up to iron gates tall enough to block out the world. For the wealthy few invited inside, the estate meant luxury. For those who worked there, it meant survival. Elena Carter knew that difference in her bones. She arrived every morning just before sunrise, her car a rattling Honda with one headlight dimmer than the other. By the time she parked near the service entrance, the sky was still painted gray, and the only sounds were the distant hum of the Atlantic and the buzz of cicadas hidden in the trees. She tied her apron, pushed open the heavy kitchen door, and stepped into another life. Inside, the estate pulsed with quiet wealth. Expensive chandeliers hung from ceilings so high they seemed to touch the heavens. Rugs thicker than mattresses muffled her footsteps. Even the smell was different: polished wood, fresh lilies delivered every 2 days, faint notes of imported wine that seeped from the cellars. Elena didn't belong here. She knew it, and the family knew it too. She wasn't a guest. She was the maid. At 29, Elena carried herself with the calm strength of someone who had weathered storms before. Her dark skin glowed under the kitchen lights, her hands steady as she folded linen napkins into perfect triangles. Every move carried dignity, even if nobody cared to see it. Elena had dreams: once college, business, her own company. But life had a way of turning promises into debts. Her mother fell ill, bills stacked up, and suddenly Elena's choices narrowed to one: take whatever work came her way. When a friend mentioned the Holtson family needed extra house staff, she swallowed her pride. It was supposed to be temporary. Temporary had stretched into 2 years. The Holtsons rarely acknowledged her. They were old money, a name whispered in Wall Street corridors, a dynasty built on steel, shipping, and real estate. At the head of it all was Travis Holtson, billionaire and patriarch. At 52, he carried himself like a man carved from stone tall, silver at the temples, his eyes a storm gray that unsettled people before he even spoke. To outsiders, he was a titan of industry. To Elena, he was simply the man whose mess she cleaned after every party. On most days, Travis barely noticed her, but sometimes, when his glass stayed too full and the hour too late, his gaze lingered longer than comfort allowed. Elena hated those moments. The summer evening that changed everything began like any other gala night. Dozens of luxury cars rolled through the gates. Women in gowns shimmered under camera flashes. Men in tailored tuxedos adjusted cufflinks worth more than Elena's annual pay. She moved quietly among them, balancing trays of champagne, whispering, "Excuse me, sir," and "Here you are," ma'am, in tones so practiced they felt mechanical. But behind the mechanical, her mind was racing. Rent was due in 3 days. Her mother's medication was almost out. Elena's hands shook slightly as she poured another glass, reminding herself, just get through tonight. Just breathe. From across the ballroom, Travis's eyes found her. At first, she thought it was coincidence, but every time she turned, there he was, glass in hand, storm gray eyes fixed on her like a hawk. His smile didn't reach his eyes, but his stare never wavered. By midnight, the music softened, guests retreated into smaller circles, and laughter drifted like smoke. Elena carried a silver tray back into the kitchen, desperate for a break. She leaned against the counter, her chest rising and falling. That's when she felt it, his presence behind her. Long night, isn't it? Travis' voice was smooth, casual, but carried a weight she couldn't ignore. She turned, tray still in hand. "Yes, sir." "It's almost over." He stepped closer, the scent of whiskey rolling off his breath. "You work hard, harder than most here." Elena froze. Compliments from him never ended well. She lowered her eyes, whispering, "Thank you, Mr. Holtson." His fingers brushed the edge of the tray, then her wrist. "You deserve more than this." She pulled back slightly, but not enough to draw attention. In this house, silence was survival. No one would believe her if she made a scene. That night blurred into memory she wished she could erase. The power imbalance was suffocating. Travis's wealth, his influence, his reputation, everything tilted in his favor. Elena's voice felt trapped in her throat. When the party ended, laughter still echoed in the halls. But for Elena, the house had never felt so empty, so cold. She drove home in silence, headlights cutting through the dark road. Her hands trembled on the wheel. In her mind, one question repeated over and over. What just happened to me? Days passed. She told no one. She couldn't. Bills still needed paying. Her mother still needed care. Life marched on, and Elena marched with it, carrying a secret no one could see. Until the morning she stood in her bathroom, fluorescent light flickering above, holding a pregnancy test that turned positive before she could blink. Her knees weakened. She sat on the edge of the tub, staring at the tiny pink line. The cheap tiles felt cold beneath her bare feet. In that small room, everything shifted. She pressed both hands to her stomach, tears burning her eyes. She whispered, as if confessing to the walls, "This child will know love, even if the world denies him." Elena Carter had just stepped onto a road she never chose, but one she would walk with quiet strength. The house on the hill had given her sorrow. The life growing inside her would give her purpose. And somewhere in the distance, beyond chandeliers and marble halls, a storm was already gathering. The week after the gala, life at the Holtson estate settled back into its usual rhythm. Cars came and went, guests dined under chandeliers, and Elena Carter slipped through the background like a shadow. On the surface, everything looked the same, but for her, nothing felt the same anymore. Elena avoided the east wing where Travis Holtson's study was located. She kept her eyes down, her voice clipped to polite phrases. "Yes, sir. Of course, ma'am. Dinner will be ready shortly." She convinced herself if she just worked harder, faster, quieter, the memories of that night might fade like spilled wine wiped from marble floors. But memory has a way of sticking, especially when fear is attached. Late evenings became the worst. Elena would fold linen in the laundry room, the hum of machines almost drowning her heartbeat, when she felt a presence in the doorway. She would look up And there he was. Travis. No glass in his hand this time. Just that storm-gray gaze fixed on her. He never said much, only lingered, watching. That silence was louder than words. One evening, he finally spoke. "You've been avoiding me," he said, leaning against the doorframe. His tone wasn't accusing, it was amused, as if her discomfort entertained him. Elena's hands froze mid-fold. "No, sir, just busy." "Busy," he repeated, savoring the word. He stepped closer. "I meant what I said. You deserve more than this." Her jaw tightened. Inside, she wanted to scream. More than this. You took my choice, my voice, and call it more. But out loud, she whispered, "Please, Mr. Holtson, I need to finish my work." He studied her a moment, then smiled faintly. "Work?" "Yes, always work." He left without another word. But the echo of his footsteps stayed long after he was gone. Elena held her breath until her chest hurt. Then she collapsed into the laundry chair, her folded linen spilling to the floor. For the first time in her life, she hated her job not because of the labor, but because of the trap it had become. Days blurred. Elena buried herself in chores, hating behind routine. She polished silver, dusted bookshelves, ironed shirts that smelled of cigars and power. She told herself survival meant silence. Yet each night, when she closed her eyes, she saw that ballroom. She felt the weight of his hand on her wrist. She heard the clink of glasses and the muffled music that had drowned out her fear. The burden became heavier when her body began to change. At first, it was small things, a wave of nausea in the mornings, fatigue that clung to her even after rest. She brushed it off as stress, until the sickness grew undeniable. One evening, alone in her tiny apartment, she bought a test from the corner drugstore. The box rattled in her purse all the way home. She locked herself in the bathroom, fluorescent light buzzing above, and waited for the result. 2 pink lines appeared, bold, unyielding. Elena gripped the sink, the cold porcelain anchoring her in place. "No," she whispered. "Not like this." Tears blurred her vision. She pressed her palm to her stomach, not yet rounded, but alive with possibility and fear. She thought of her mother in the next room, sleeping fitfully, unaware of her daughter's storm. She thought of bills stacked like dominoes on the kitchen counter. She thought of Travis's smirk, his voice dripping with confidence that money could bury anything. For a long time, Elena sat on the bathroom floor, knees to her chest, head pressed against the wall. Her mind raced with impossible choices. She could end it. No one would know. The secret would vanish with her silence. Or she could keep the child, a living reminder of a night she wanted to forget. A risk that could tie her forever to a man who saw her as disposable. Her hands trembled. Her heart whispered louder than fear. This child deserves love, even if the world denies him. From that night on, Elena carried her decision like a torch, quiet, flickering, but unbreakable. At the estate, she hid the changes under loose uniforms. She worked double shifts to save money, praying her strength would hold. Morning sickness became a battle, but she fought it with grit, ducking into bathrooms to retch before returning to serve hors d'oeuvres with steady hands. Some nights, she lay awake in her apartment, one hand on her stomach, whispering, "I'll protect you, no matter what it takes." Still, doubt gnawed at her. Would her child resent her? Would he look like Travis? Would those storm-gray eyes stare back at her one day, reminding her of everything she lost? Weeks turned into months. The secret grew heavier. Yet so did her resolve. Elena knew she could no longer simply survive. She had to fight for her child, for her dignity, for the voice stolen from her that night. Meanwhile, rumors began to stir within the estate staff. Whispers in the kitchen, glances exchanged in the hallways. One housekeeper asked quietly if Elena was feeling unwell. Another suggested she see a doctor. She deflected with practiced smiles. But rumors, like cracks in marble, spread. One afternoon, as Elena scrubbed crystal glasses in the pantry, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned, expecting another maid. Instead, it was Travis, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You've been different," he said. His voice was low, measured. "Anything I should know?" Her breath caught. Her hand tightened around the glass. "No, sir. Just tired." "Tired," he repeated, studying her. His gaze lingered on her midsection, still flat but tense under her apron. Elena forced a smile. "I'll finish these quickly." Travis tilted his head, as if weighing whether to push further. Finally, he shrugged and walked away. But his eyes, those storm-gray eyes, left a chill behind. That night, Elena sat at her small kitchen table, bills scattered around her, test results hidden in a drawer. She stared at the flickering candlelight, whispering to herself, "I'm stronger than this. I have to be." She thought about the child again, not just as a burden, but as a chance to rewrite the story of her life. Maybe she couldn't change what Travis did, but she could choose how she responded. Resolve settled over her like armor. She would not beg Travis for help. She would not let shame silence her. Her child would grow up knowing love, even if his father denied him. The night that changed everything had left scars, but it had also planted a seed of life, of courage, of a future Elena refused to let anyone steal. Far away, in the great house on the hill, Travis drank his whiskey and dismissed the world with ease. He had no idea that the choice Elena made in her cramped bathroom would one day bring him to his knees. Winter crept into New York with icy breath. By the time the first snow dusted the sidewalks of Queens, Elena Carter's secret had grown too heavy to hide from herself. She moved slower at work, pausing to catch her breath after climbing stairs, turning away when morning nausea struck like a wave. At home, in her small second-floor apartment above a laundromat, the walls felt closer each night. Her mother's cough echoed through the thin plaster, each sound a reminder of the bills Elena could barely pay. The pregnancy test she had taken weeks ago lay hidden in the drawer of her nightstand. She hadn't thrown it away. Each time she opened that drawer looking for a pen, a receipt, her eyes fell on the white plastic strip with its faint but undeniable pink lines. Proof. A secret witness. Elena told herself she could handle this alone. But the truth gnawed at her during long shifts. While polishing silver trays, she wondered if anyone noticed the circles under her eyes. While vacuuming the library, she paused, pressing her hand against the steady thrum in her stomach. At night, she whispered to herself, "You chose this. You'll protect this life. No one can take that from you." But courage alone didn't erase the fear. She thought often about what would happen if Travis Holtson found out. Would he fire her? Would he send lawyers to erase her voice? The memory of his smirk returned uninvited, sharp as broken glass. He carried power like other men carried watches or cufflinks casually, without effort, but with enough force to crush anyone who stood in the way. Elena didn't sleep much those nights. By her third month, her uniform no longer fit the same. She adjusted aprons tighter, layered sweaters, and kept her posture rigid. Other staff began to whisper, though never to her face. One morning, while she fetched linens, She overheard two maids in the hall. "Have you noticed Elena? She looks different. Maybe she's just tired." "No, I've seen that look before. She's expecting." Elena froze, the basket heavy in her arms. Their voices pricked at her skin. She wanted to scream, to tell them they didn't know the truth. But she walked past silently, chin high, eyes forward. Silence was still her shield. At home, she kept journals, pages filled with questions for the child she hadn't met yet. "Will you laugh like me? Will you hate storms or love them? Will you forgive me for bringing you into this world the way I did?" She wrote by candlelight, words smudged by tears. Sometimes her mother shuffled into the kitchen, fragile but sharp-eyed. "You're working too hard, baby," she said one evening, sipping tea. Elena smiled, masking her exhaustion. "I'll be fine. Mama, don't worry about me." Her mother reached across the table, placing a trembling hand over hers. "You carry so much on your shoulders. Don't let it break you." Elena nodded, unable to speak the truth out loud. The first doctor's appointment terrified her. She saved cash tips for weeks, then walked into a small clinic off Jamaica Avenue. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and old magazines. She filled out forms with shaking hands, keeping her head low as if someone might recognize her. When the nurse placed the wand on her belly, a sound filled the room fast, rhythmic, insistent, the baby's heartbeat. Elena covered her mouth, tears sliding down her cheeks. For the first time, the child was no longer just lines on a stick or whispers in her mind. It was real, alive, pounding with life inside her. She left the clinic clutching a grainy black and white photo. On the bus ride home, she stared at it until her vision blurred. That night, she tucked the photo into her journal, whispering, "I don't know how I'll do this, but I promise I will." As the months passed, the contrast between her two worlds sharpened. At the Holtson estate, crystal glasses sparkled under chandeliers, and laughter echoed through vast marble halls. Elena served plates of filet mignon while hunger twisted in her stomach. She listened to guests praise Travis for his charity donations, his vision, his legacy. All the while, her child, the child he would deny, grew silently inside her. At home, she heated cans of soup, counted change for bus fare, and prayed her mother's medication would last until payday. Each night, she whispered promises to her unborn child, building hope where there was none. One evening, as snow piled high on the curb outside, Elena sat alone at the kitchen table. The baby kicked for the first time a gentle flutter that made her gasp. She pressed her palm to her belly, tears springing to her eyes. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "I feel you. You're strong already." The moment filled her with warmth, but also with dread. How long could she keep this hidden? How would she explain when the truth came out? Her worst fear materialized 2 weeks later. Travis entered the kitchen unexpectedly, jacket draped over his shoulder, tie loosened. Elena froze mid-task, clutching a bowl. His eyes scanned the room, then landed on her. "Stay a moment," he said. She swallowed hard, placing the bowl down. He stepped closer, his presence heavy. "You've been quiet lately." "Yes, sir. Just busy." His gaze drifted downward, lingering too long. Elena's breath caught. "Busy," he echoed, the word loaded. "Make sure it doesn't interfere with your work." She nodded quickly, forcing calm. "Of course, Mr. Holtson." He studied her another moment, then left. But the chill of his suspicion stayed, wrapping itself around her like a chain. That night, Elena sat awake with her journal open, pen hovering. She wrote, "He will not define me. He will not define this child." I will not let fear silence me again. Her hand pressed to her stomach. She whispered to the life inside her, "We'll walk through fire if we must, but we'll walk it together." Elena Carter had no illusions left. She knew storms were coming, storms as gray as the eyes that haunted her. But with every heartbeat inside her, she felt the smallest spark of defiance, a spark that would one day ignite into truth too powerful to deny. The spring air carried a chill the night Elena Carter went into labor. The city outside her window was restless, sirens echoing through Queens, car horns blaring, the hum of life that never seemed to sleep. Inside her small apartment, however, the world had shrunk to the sound of her breathing, sharp and uneven, and the ache pulsing through her body. Her mother clutched her hand. "Baby, you need the hospital now." Elena nodded, sweat beading her forehead. Fear battled with resolve in her eyes. She had carried this child alone for 9 months, whispering promises into the dark, writing letters he couldn't yet read. Now, those promises pressed forward, demanding to be kept. The cab ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and tight knuckles. Elena pressed her forehead against the cool window, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since she was a child. "God, please, let him come safely. Give me the strength. At St. Luke's Hospital." Fluorescent lights replaced the night sky. Nurses rushed her into a delivery room. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled the air. Her body trembled with contractions, pain slicing through her, but her grip on her mother's hand never loosened. Hours felt like days. Sweat soaked her sheets. Her cries mingled with the beeping monitors. Through it all, Elena's mind clung to one thought. This child deserves love. He deserves more than silence. When the doctor finally lifted the baby into the air, the cry that filled the room was sharp, fierce, alive. Elena's tears flowed freely as they placed the tiny bundle in her arms. She looked down and saw him, her son. His skin was soft and warm against hers, his mouth searching instinctively for comfort. But it was his eyes that made her breath hitch. Though still newborn soft, their hue was unmistakable, storm gray. Elena brushed his cheek with trembling fingers. "Hello, Caleb," she whispered. She had chosen the name months ago, written it at the top of every journal entry. Caleb faithful, brave, wholehearted. "I'm your mama, and I promise you, no matter what they say, you are mine. You are loved." Her mother leaned close, tears streaming down her face. "He's beautiful, Elena, just beautiful." For a brief moment, peace blanketed the room, but peace never lingered long where power loomed. The door creaked open. Elena turned her head and froze. Standing there, tall and commanding in a dark coat, was Travis Holtson. The air shifted, heavy with tension. Nurses paused, eyes darting between the billionaire and the woman on the bed. Travis stepped forward, his gaze flicking to the child in Elena's arms. His jaw tightened. "So it's true," he muttered, voice low but cutting. Elena pulled Caleb closer, instinctively protective. "Why are you here?" Her voice was weak from exhaustion, yet steady with defiance. Travis's eyes narrowed. "Because whispers travel, and whispers about me cannot be ignored." He studied Caleb, the resemblance undeniable. The same storm-gray eyes looked back at him. For a fleeting second, something flickered across his face, recognition, perhaps even fear, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "This means nothing," he snapped, turning his gaze on Elena. "Do not think for a second you can trap me with this." Elena's heart pounded. Her mother stiffened beside her, fury burning in her tired eyes. "Trap you?" She carried this child alone while you drank champagne in your mansion. Travis ignored her. He pulled an envelope from his coat and tossed it onto the table beside the bed. Take this. Enough to keep you quiet. Enough to make this disappear. Elena stared at the envelope but didn't touch it. Her arms tightened around Caleb. Money doesn't erase truth. His lip curled in disdain. Truth. People believe what I tell them to believe. You're a maid, Elena, a nobody. Do you think anyone will side with you over me? The words sliced deep, but Elena refused to flinch. She lifted her chin. I don't care if the whole world doubts me. This child is mine, and he will know love, whether you claim him or not. For the first time, Travis faltered. His eyes flicked again to Caleb, who stirred in Elena's arms, his storm-gray gaze wide and unblinking. It was like looking into a mirror he didn't want to face. But pride held him. He turned sharply and strode toward the door. You'll regret this. The door slammed shut behind him, leaving silence in his wake. Elena exhaled shakily, pressing her lips to Caleb's forehead. Her mother reached for the envelope and shoved it back toward the door with trembling hands. We don't need his money. We'll make it. Elena, somehow. Tears streamed down Elena's face, but her voice carried quiet strength. Yes, Mama, somehow. In the days that followed, the hospital became both sanctuary and battlefield. Elena nursed Caleb with tenderness, whispering lullabies while ignoring the sidelong glances of staff who had recognized Travis Holtson. Rumors spread quickly, too quickly. By the time she was discharged, whispers chased her down hallways, echoing louder than the squeak of her hospital shoes. At home, life reshaped itself around the newborn. Nights blurred into dawns, cries into lullabies. Elena stumbled through exhaustion, yet each time she looked at Caleb's storm-gray eyes, she found strength she didn't know she had. Neighbors stopped by with casseroles, church members offered diapers, and Mrs. Green from downstairs insisted on watching Caleb so Elena could rest. The kindness of others softened the edges of her struggle, but survival remained hard. Bills stacked higher. Formula and medicine drained her small savings. Still, she pressed forward, refusing to bend, her journal filled with new promises. Caleb, you will never feel unwanted. You will never feel unloved, even if your father denies you. I never will. And though she tried to shield him, every time she saw those eyes, the storm-gray inheritance of a man who had walked away, her heart clenched. Not in rejection, but in resolve. She would raise her son in truth, even if the world called it a lie. Summer came heavy and unrelenting. The air in Queens carried the smell of hot asphalt and fried food from corner carts. And inside Elena Carter's small apartment, the ceiling fan barely cut through the heat. She moved carefully through her days, cradling Caleb in one arm while folding laundry with the other. He was 3 months old now, growing quickly. His tiny fist flailed with surprising strength, and his cries carried a conviction that startled Elena sometimes. Neighbors who stopped by to coo at him would smile and shake their heads. He's going to be a fighter, they'd say. But it wasn't just his strength that caught attention. It was his eyes, storm-gray, sharp against his brown skin. Eyes that carried the stamp of a man Elena wanted to forget, but never could. Everywhere she went, those eyes drew comment. At the grocery store, the cashier leaned forward, squinting. He's got such unusual eyes for a baby. Where'd he get those? Elena would smile politely, pulling Caleb closer. From God, she'd reply softly, avoiding further conversation. But inside, the question cut deeper than strangers could know. At night, she lay awake with Caleb asleep on her chest, listening to the rise and fall of his breathing. She whispered prayers that the world would see him for who he was, her son, before they saw the resemblance he bore to a man who had denied him. Still, the world had a way of noticing what one wanted hidden. By late July, gossip had already begun to circle. Other maids from the Holtson estate whispered when Elena passed them in the break room. She heard snippets, the eyes. Her baby. It must be his. Elena kept her head high, but shame and fury battled inside her. Each day at work felt like walking a tightrope balancing between silence and the temptation to shout the truth for all to hear. Her mother noticed the toll it was taking. "You can't keep swallowing this, baby," she said one evening as she rocked Caleb gently in her arms. "Silence eats at the soul." Elena sighed, pressing her palms to her temples. "What choice do I have? Mama, if I speak, he'll crush me. If I stay quiet, they still whisper. Either way, I'm cornered." Her mother's eyes softened. "You are stronger than you know. You're not cornered. You're choosing to protect your child. That's not weakness. Elena, that's courage." Elena wanted to believe her. She wanted to stand tall against the storm. But each day, the storm grew closer. One evening, as the estate prepared for yet another lavish party, Elena found herself summoned by Margaret Lane, the house manager. Margaret's sharp eyes missed little, and tonight they seemed to pierce Elena's composure. "Carter," she said briskly, clipboard in hand, "I hear talk about your child." Elena's stomach tightened. "Talk." Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You should know what they're saying. That the boy looks like Mr. Holtson. That you're trying to trap him." Elena's breath caught. She forced her voice steady. "That's not true." Margaret raised a brow. Her tone clipped. "True or not, whispers are dangerous here. Watch yourself. The Holtsons don't take kindly to scandal." Elena nodded quickly, though inside her heart thundered. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Caleb, they see you as a scandal, but I see you as my salvation. They see shame. I see light. I will not let them define you." Weeks blurred into one another. Elena continued to work, her body weary but her resolve unbroken. Caleb grew stronger, his laugh bubbling like music. His presence filled their small apartment with joy, even as the shadow of his father's denial hung over them. Then came the Sunday afternoon, when silence shattered. Elena had taken Caleb to the neighborhood park, pushing him gently in a borrowed stroller. The sun was high, children shouted from swings, and the smell of grilled hot dogs floated through the air. For once, she allowed herself to breathe, to enjoy the small slice of ordinary life, until she saw the familiar figure striding down the path. Travis Holtson, dressed casually in pressed slacks and a polo shirt. He looked out of place among the family sprawled on picnic blankets. His eyes locked on the stroller, then on Elena. Her chest tightened. She considered walking away, but her legs rooted to the spot. He stopped in front of her, gaze fixed on Caleb. The baby stared back, unblinking, storm-gray eyes wide and curious. Travis's jaw clenched. For a long moment, silence stretched between them. Finally, he spoke. "So this is him." Elena's voice was low, controlled. "This is Caleb." Travis' lip curled, half sneer, half something else. "He looks familiar." Elena's heart pounded. "Because he's yours." The words hung heavy in the air. Travis' eyes hardened. "You will not use that child against me." Elena drew herself up, strength rising through her exhaustion. "I don't need to use him. The truth shows in his eyes." Travis looked at Caleb again, and for the briefest flicker of a second, something broke in his expression. recognition, maybe even guilt, but then pride slammed back into place. He turned to Elena, voice sharp. "Be careful. Carter, you're treading dangerous ground." With that, he walked away, leaving Elena trembling but unbowed. Later that night, she rocked Caleb to sleep, her own tears falling silently. She whispered into his soft hair, "They may call you dangerous. They may call me a liar. But we will not break. We will never break." Elena Carter had no illusions left. The storm had arrived, and though fear wrapped itself around her, something deeper burned brighter in unshakable resolve. By autumn, the gossip had outgrown whispers. What began as quiet speculation in the servant corridors of the Holtson estate now seeped into marble halls and chandeliered dining rooms. Guests who attended Travis Holtson's glittering parties leaned closer over crystal glasses, murmuring behind manicured hands. "Elena Carter has a child. They say the boy has Travis's eyes. Imagine the scandal if it's true. The mansion, once a fortress of control, now echoed with uncertainty." Travis noticed the stares, the sideways glances, and though he walked with his usual arrogance, the tension in his jaw betrayed him. For Elena, each day at work became a trial. She moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, her uniform crisp, her face a mask of calm. Yet every conversation she overheard pressed like a weight on her chest. She knew the world loved scandal more than truth, and truth was dangerous when it threatened the powerful at home. Caleb was crawling now, laughter filling the apartment. His storm-gray eyes shone with curiosity as he pulled himself up on furniture, determined to explore every corner. Elena found strength in those moments, but also fear. The older he grew, the clearer the resemblance became. One evening, as she prepared bottles in the kitchen, her mother spoke softly from the doorway. "Baby, you can't hide forever. People already see what they see." Elena shook her head. "I know, but if I speak, Travis will destroy me. If I stay quiet, they'll destroy me anyway. I don't know which road is safer for Caleb." Her mother crossed the room, laying a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Maybe it's not about safety. Maybe it's about what you want him to know when he grows. That his mama was silent, or that she stood tall." Elena swallowed hard, her eyes glistening. She had written similar words in her journal, but hearing them aloud cut deeper. The turning point came during a fundraiser gala hosted in the estate's ballroom. Elena was assigned to serve wine. She moved gracefully among the glittering crowd, balancing trays as laughter and piano music swirled around her. Halfway through the evening, she overheard a conversation that stopped her cold. A senator's wife, pearls gleaming at her throat, leaned toward her companion. "It's remarkable. Really. Travis spends millions on charities for children, yet can't even acknowledge his own." The words pierced Elena like arrows. She almost stumbled, clutching the tray tighter. Heat rushed to her face, but she forced herself to keep moving, to maintain composure. Later that night, when the guests had gone and the staff cleaned in weary silence, Margaret Lane pulled her aside. "Carter," she said, her voice clipped, "do you realize what's happening? This isn't just gossip anymore. It's blood in the water, and sharks are circling." Elena's brow furrowed. "What do you mean reporters are calling? Donors are whispering. If this grows, it won't just threaten you. It will threaten all of us. The Holtsons won't forgive that. The warning was clear. Protect yourself or be consumed." But fate had other plans. 2 weeks later, Elena received a letter slipped under her apartment door. The envelope bore no name, just her address scrawled in a hurried hand. Inside, she found a folded photograph. It showed her walking through the park with Caleb in his stroller. The photo was grainy, likely taken from a distance, but his storm-gray eyes were unmistakable even in shadow. On the back, a single line was scrawled, "The world deserves to know." Elena's heart pounded as she clutched the paper. Someone was watching, someone outside her control. That night, she sat by the window while Caleb slept, the city lights flickering below. Her journal lay open on her lap. She wrote, "Do I fight for truth now, or wait until it consumes us? Will Caleb grow up hating my silence or fearing my courage?" The struggle inside her deepened. She longed to protect her son, to shield him from the ugliness of power. Yet she also longed to break free from the cage of denial Travis had built around them. The tension reached its peak one evening when Travis confronted her directly. He entered the staff corridor unannounced, his presence startling in the narrow, dimly lit space. Elena froze as a shadow stretched across the wall. "Carter," he said, his tone sharp. She turned slowly, holding her ground. "Mr. Holtson." His eyes burned into hers. "I don't know who is feeding these stories, but they end now. Do you understand?" Elena's voice trembled, but did not break. "Stories. You mean Caleb?" Travis's jaw tightened. "Don't say his name." She took a step forward, defiance rising in her chest. "He has a name. He has eyes that tell the truth, even if you won't." For a moment, Travis faltered. His gaze flicked, just briefly, to the memory he refused to acknowledge. Then his pride returned, cold and cutting. "You think people will believe you?" He sneered. "You're a maid. I am Holtson. This is my city. My name writes the truth." Elena's heart raced, but she lifted her chin. "Maybe your name writes it today. But one day, Caleb's eyes will speak louder than your lies." Travis glared at her, then turned sharply and walked away, his footsteps echoing like thunder down the corridor. Elena leaned against the wall, her breath shaking. Fear coiled in her stomach, but beneath it burned something fiercer. Resolve. "At home that night," she whispered to Caleb as he stirred in his crib, "they think we're small, little one, but small things can shake mountains. You'll see. One day, they'll see." The storm was no longer just approaching. It had arrived, sweeping through marble halls and whispered circles, and in its eye stood Elena Carter, trembling, yet unbroken. The first chill of November settled over New York when the story broke. Elena Carter was finishing her shift in the Holtson estate's vast kitchen when her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. She rarely checked it during work, but the vibration wouldn't stop. Pulling it out, she saw dozens of messages flashing across the screen. "Have you seen this, Elena? Turn on the news. It's about Caleb." Her chest tightened. With trembling hands, she clicked a link one of her neighbors had sent. There, on the homepage of a major news outlet, blazed the headline, "Whispers around Travis Holtson, billionaire's alleged child in Queens." Beneath the words was a grainy photograph, the same one she had found in the envelope weeks earlier. The stroller, the unmistakable eyes. Caleb. The room spun. She stumbled backward, clutching the counter for support. Around her, staff exchanged glances, pretending not to notice, but their whispers began almost immediately. "Elena, it's her. That's the baby. God help her." Her shift ended in chaos. Margaret Lane pulled her aside, face pale. "Get out of here. Carter, press will be outside the gates by morning. Protect your boy." Elena didn't argue. She rushed home, heart hammering, and found her mother pacing the apartment. The television blared with panelists dissecting the story, debating its credibility. "This is war now," her mother whispered. "They won't let this rest." That night, Elena barely slept. Each time Caleb stirred, she clutched him tighter, her mind racing with fear. The photo had unleashed something unstoppable. By dawn, reporters swarmed outside the laundromat below her apartment, their cameras pointed upward. Neighbors whispered as she passed, some sympathetic, others wary. "Elena, is it true?" one shouted. "Does Holtson know another pressed?" She kept her eyes forward, her hand shielding Caleb's face as she hurried to the corner store. Inside, the owner shook his head solemnly. "You've got a storm on your hands. Elena, be careful." The storm only grew. Within days, tabloids splashed Caleb's photo across their covers, zooming in on his storm-gray eyes. Talk shows speculated, some mocking, others sympathetic. One commentator sneered, "Even if it's true, what did she expect a maid thinking she could climb that high?" Elena's blood boiled, but she refused to speak. She shielded Caleb as best she could, refusing interviews, turning away microphones shoved in her face. Silence remained her armor, though each day it felt thinner. Meanwhile, in the marble halls of the Holtson estate, Travis raged. At a board meeting of Holtson Global, his voice thundered across the polished table. "This is slander, lies spread by vultures. We will sue every outlet that runs with it." His advisors exchanged nervous glances. One finally spoke. "Sir, the resemblance. People won't ignore it. If you deny too strongly, it may backfire." Travis slammed a fist on the table. "I built this empire. No maid, no child, no photograph will tear it down." But even as he spoke, doubt gnawed at him. Every time he saw the photo, Caleb's eyes stared back, his own eyes reflected in miniature. Elena felt the weight of his wrath days later. Returning from the pharmacy, she found two men in suits waiting by her apartment building. Their smiles were cold, their voices rehearsed. "Miss Carter," one said smoothly, "Mr. Holtson would like to resolve this matter privately. There's a generous settlement on the table, if you'll agree to certain conditions." Elena tightened her grip on Caleb's stroller. "Conditions?" "Silence," the man replied. "You'll sign an agreement, no interviews, no claims of paternity. You'll disappear from public view. In return, financial security for you and your son." Her pulse raced. For a fleeting second, the offer tempted her stability, safety, a shield against the chaos. But then she looked down at Caleb. His storm-gray eyes blinked up at her, trusting, unknowing. She shook her head firmly. "My son is not a secret to be bought. Tell Mr. Holtson that." The men's smiles faded. "You're making a mistake," one muttered before they left. Elena carried Caleb upstairs, her legs trembling, her mind swirling. She collapsed into a chair, clutching him close. Tears blurred her vision, but her resolve sharpened. "No one will erase you, Caleb," she whispered. "Not while I breathe." Days turned into weeks, the scandal refusing to fade. Paparazzi trailed Elena on the streets, snapping photos of her carrying groceries, pushing Caleb's stroller, entering church on Sundays. Strangers sent letters, some supportive, others cruel. One afternoon, a woman Elena had never met approached her outside the laundromat. She was middle-aged, well-dressed, her eyes kind. "I saw your story on the news," she said softly. "My mother was in the same place once. Don't let them silence you. Truth has a way of standing, even when the world tries to crush it." The words lingered with Elena long after the woman walked away. Her mother urged caution. "Baby, you've got to think carefully. They're circling like wolves. Don't give them more reason to strike. But Elena felt something shifting inside her. For months she had chosen silence, hoping to protect Caleb. Now, silence felt like complicity in Travis's denial. Her journal filled with torn thoughts. If I speak, they'll try to destroy me. If I don't, Caleb grows up seeing me bow to lies. The breaking point came when she saw a news segment featuring Travis himself. He stood at a podium, cameras flashing, his voice calm and commanding. "These rumors are baseless," he declared. "I will not be distracted from the work of Holtson Global by malicious gossip. I have no connection to this woman or her child." The words cut deeper than any blade. Elena sat frozen on the couch, Caleb asleep in her arms, as Travis erased them with a sentence. Tears slid silently down her face. She whispered into the stillness, "You will not be erased, not by him, not by anyone." That night, she wrote her decision in her journal, the ink dark and final tomorrow. I speak. The morning she decided to speak, the sky hung heavy with gray clouds, as though the city itself was bracing for a storm. Elena Carter rose before dawn, her nerves buzzing like electricity beneath her skin. Caleb stirred in his crib, his soft coos grounding her for a fleeting moment. She leaned over, brushing a kiss against his forehead. "This is for you, my love," she whispered. "So one day, you'll know your mama didn't stay quiet." Her mother, seated at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, watched her prepare. "Are you sure about this, Elena?" Elena nodded slowly, though her hands trembled as she buttoned her blouse. "I can't let him erase us any more. If I keep silent, Caleb grows up believing lies. If I speak, at least he'll know his mother tried." Her mother sighed, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Then go. Speak truth. But remember, truth comes with a price." By mid-morning, Elena stood outside a small community center in Queens, her heart pounding. Reporters had gathered after a tip-off from someone she trusted, someone who had promised her a platform without sensationalism. She stepped up to the podium, cameras clicking, microphones pushed forward. The room buzzed with anticipation. Some reporters looked skeptical, others hungry. A few seemed genuinely curious. Elena cleared her throat, her voice wavering at first but gaining strength as she spoke. "My name is Elena Carter. I am a maid, I am a daughter, and I am a mother." She paused, glancing toward the back where her mother held Caleb in her arms. His storm-gray eyes looked back at her, steady as stone. "For months, people have whispered about me and my child," she continued. Oh, whispers that grew louder until they became headlines. "Today, I want to speak plainly. Caleb Carter is my son, and his father is Travis Holtson." The room erupted, reporters shouting questions, flashes exploding like lightning. Elena held up her hand. "I know what some of you will think, that I am lying, that I am seeking money, but I don't stand here for myself. I stand here because no child deserves to be denied. No mother deserves to be silenced." Her voice cracked, but she pressed on. "I carried him alone. I brought him into this world without a hand to hold, and every night I've written to him, promising he will know love, even if his father denies him. I am not asking for sympathy. I am asking for truth to matter." The questions came hard and fast. "Do you have proof? Are you suing Holtson? Why speak now?" Elena steadied herself. "The proof is in his eyes. The proof is in my journals, in every detail of what I lived. And why now? Because silence was eating me alive. Because I want my son to grow up knowing I didn't bow to lies." Her mother stepped forward then, holding Caleb high enough for the cameras. Gas rippled through the crowd as the baby blinked at the sea of faces. His storm-gray eyes, unblinking, shone beneath the harsh lights. The photos flashed instantly across the internet. The eyes of Holtson. One headline read within the hour, but not everyone received her truth kindly. Within minutes of the press conference ending, Holtson Global released a statement. Cold and clinical, Mr. Holtson categorically denies the false allegations made by Miss Carter. These defamatory claims are intended to exploit his name and reputation. Legal action will be pursued. The statement hit Elena like a slap. She had expected denial, but the harshness still stung. Back home, she collapsed into a chair, exhaustion rolling over her. Her mother rocked Caleb gently, murmuring comfort. You did what you had to. Don't doubt that. But doubt clawed at Elena nonetheless. That night, as she tucked Caleb into his crib, she whispered, Did I make it worse for you, my love, or did I make it better? Tears welled in her eyes. All I know is, I couldn't let him erase you. The following days were a whirlwind. Reporters camped outside her building. Neighbors divided in their opinions. Some praised her courage. Others called her reckless. Social media ignited. Hashtags spreading like wildfire. Storm gray truth. Caleb's eyes. Justice for Elena. Talk shows debated endlessly. Some hosts defended her bravery. She spoke truth to power. Others sneered. Another woman trying to climb the ladder on a billionaire's back. And through it all, Travis Holtson grew more ruthless. His lawyers filed motions. His spokespeople repeated the word defamation like a mantra. But the harder he pushed, the louder the story grew. Because every article, every headline, carried the same photograph Caleb's storm-gray eyes. Impossible to ignore. One evening, while Elena tried to slip quietly into the laundromat to collect her clothes, she was stopped by a young woman she didn't know. Her hair was tucked into a beanie. Her expression earnest. I'm sorry to bother you, the woman said softly. But I had to tell you I grew up without a father. Everyone pretended it didn't matter. But it did. Seeing you stand up, it matters. For me. For others like me. Don't stop. Elena blinked back tears, nodding. Thank you, she whispered. That night, she wrote in her journal, maybe the truth hurts, maybe it costs, but maybe it also heals. Not just me, not just Caleb, but others who have lived in silence. And though fear still gripped her, she felt something new take root in its place: hope. Hope that truth, once spoken, would not be silenced again. For weeks after Elena Carter's press conference, the city pulsed with debate, on subway trains, in corner delis, even in corporate boardrooms. People argued over whether she was a truth-teller or a liar chasing headlines. Caleb's storm-gray eyes became a symbol, plastered across newspapers, memes, and late-night comedy shows. Some mocked with cruel humor side-by-side comparisons of Travis Holtson and the infant, captions dripping with sarcasm. Others defended Elena fiercely, calling her courage an act of rebellion against a culture that let powerful men deny accountability. Elena felt as though she were living under a magnifying glass. When she took Caleb to the park, strangers approached with cell phones raised. When she stood in line at the grocery store, whispers followed. Even walking down the street became an act of endurance. One afternoon, as she pushed Caleb's stroller through the neighborhood, a man in a tailored suit stepped into her path. He wasn't a reporter. His demeanor was too polished, his expression too cold. "You've made a mistake," he said quietly, leaning down so only she could hear. "People like you don't win against people like him. You should stop now. for your child's sake." Elena's pulse quickened, but she met his gaze steadily. "Tell Mr. Holtson, I've already chosen my child's sake, and it doesn't include silence." The man's jaw tightened. Without another word, he stepped aside, vanishing into the crowd. That night, Elena told her mother what had happened. Her mother's hands shook as she stirred tea. "He's trying to scare you. Don't let him see fear." "I'm not afraid," Elena whispered, though in truth she was, not for herself, but for Caleb. The following week, Elena received an unexpected call. The number was unfamiliar, but she answered anyway. "Miss Carter." The voice on the line was low, urgent. "My name is Daniel Reeve. I'm a journalist. I think you should know there are internal emails at Holtson Global. Emails about you, about your son. They're trying to bury them. But I have sources. Do you want to see them?" Elena froze. "Why would you help me?" "Because truth matters," Reeve replied. "And because people like Holtson think they can control the story forever. But they can't." She hesitated, torn between fear and the possibility of proof. "Finally," she whispered, "yes, show me." 2 nights later, in the dim light of a coffee shop, Reeve slid a folder across the table. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside were printed messages between Holtson executives strategizing how to contain the Carter situation. One line struck her like a blow. "Even if the child is his, deny everything. Silence the mother. Pay her off if necessary." Her chest tightened, anger flooding her veins. Here it was, confirmation she hadn't been imagining, the cruelty, the manipulation. It was written in black and white. Reeve leaned closer. "With this, you could take him to court. At the very least, you can show the world he's not just denying, he's orchestrating." Elena closed the folder slowly. "If I go to court, he'll try to destroy me." Reeve's eyes softened. "Maybe, but if you don't, what does Caleb grow up learning about truth?" The question haunted her long after she returned home. That night, she stood over Caleb's crib, watching his tiny chest rise and fall. His storm-gray eyes fluttered beneath his lids, caught in dreams she would never see. She whispered into the quiet, "One day, you'll ask me if I fought for you. I want to say yes, even if it costs me everything." The next morning, Elena met with a legal aid attorney named Karen Liu, recommended by Reeve. Karen listened carefully, her pen scratching across a notepad as Elena explained everything: her work at the estate, her pregnancy, Travis's denial, the hush money offer, the threats, and now the emails. Karen finally looked up. "Elena, you have a case. It won't be easy. He'll throw money and lawyers at this until you want to give up. But with these emails, with Caleb, you have more than whispers. You have evidence." Elena exhaled shakily. "I don't want his money. I don't even want him. I just want Caleb to know the truth." Karen nodded firmly. "Then we'll fight for that." Word of the possible lawsuit leaked within days. News outlets exploded with speculation. Protesters gathered outside Holtson Global headquarters, some demanding justice, others mocking Elena as a gold digger. Signs waved in the air. "Every child deserves a father. Truth over power. Stop the silence." Inside the Holtson estate, Travis raged once more. He paced his office, barking orders into the phone. "Find out who leaked those emails. Crush them. I won't be humiliated by a maid." But no matter how many statements his team issued, no matter how many threats they made, the tide of public opinion had begun to shift. People weren't just talking about Elena anymore. They were talking about power, denial, and the countless women who had been silenced before. One evening, As Elena watched coverage of the protests on television, she felt her mother's hand on her shoulder. "You've started something bigger than us," her mother said softly. "Maybe that's why this had to happen." Elena nodded slowly, tears brimming in her eyes. "I just wanted Caleb to know love. Now the whole world is watching to see if truth still means anything." She looked down at her son, who clutched her finger with his tiny hand, his storm-gray eyes wide and unblinking, and in that moment, Elena knew whatever came next. Lawsuits, threats, humiliations, she would not step back, because the world was no longer whispering. It was listening. The summons arrived on a cold December morning, the envelope thick, stamped with the seal of the New York Supreme Court. Elena Carter sat at her kitchen table, Caleb asleep in his crib, her hands trembling as she opened it. Inside lay the official notice she was required to appear for a deposition in the case against Travis Holtson. Her mother watched her carefully. "It's real now, baby. No turning back." Elena exhaled slowly, her chest tight. "I never thought it would come this far, but maybe it always had to." The weeks leading up to the deposition felt like walking a tightrope above a roaring crowd. Every step she took was scrutinized by reporters, by neighbors, even by strangers online. Some praised her as a hero. Others hurled insults so vile she stopped reading comments altogether. Karen Liu, her attorney, prepared her tirelessly. They met in a small office downtown, its shelves crowded with legal texts and case files. Karen leaned forward, her tone steady but firm. "Elena, they're going to try to break you. Their lawyers will twist your words, attack your character, paint you as manipulative. You need to stay calm, answer honestly, and remember why you're there. Not for them, for Caleb." Elena nodded, clutching her journal in her lap. The journal had become her shield, filled with letters to her son, moments of pain, and the heartbeat of her resolve. When the day arrived, she dressed simply black slacks, a cream blouse, her hair pulled back neatly. Karen walked beside her into the towering glass building where the deposition would take place. Cameras flashed outside, reporters shouting questions. Elena kept her eyes forward, her hand brushing the edge of her journal tucked safely in her bag. Inside the conference room, the air was thick with tension. At one end of the long mahogany table sat Travis Holtson, flanked by a team of high-priced lawyers. He wore a tailored suit, his expression carved from stone, but his storm-gray eyes flicked once toward Elena, cold and dismissive. She sat opposite, Karen at her side. The stenographer prepared her machine, and the questioning began. "Miss Carter," one of Holtson's attorneys started smoothly. "How long have you been employed at the Holtson estate?" "3 years," Elena replied, her voice steady though her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "And during that time, did you ever seek a relationship with Mr.?" Holtson Karen's hand twitched slightly, a silent warning. Elena's chin lifted. "No, I sought only to do my job." The lawyer leaned back, smirking faintly. "Yet you claim he is the father of your child." "I don't claim," Elena said softly. "I know." Murmurs rippled across the room. The lawyer pressed on, circling like a predator. "Do you have any proof?" "Aside from your word," Elena reached into her bag and pulled out her journal, laying it gently on the table. "This is my proof. Every day of my pregnancy. I wrote what I lived. Every fear, every moment, and every entry tells the same truth." The lawyer's eyes narrowed. "A diary is not evidence," Karen interjected calmly, "but it is testimony of her lived experience, admissible in context." Across the table, Travis shifted uncomfortably, though he said nothing. The questioning dragged on for hours. They asked about her finances, implying she stood to gain from the scandal. They asked about her past relationships, dredging up personal history as though it were ammunition. They even asked about her mother's health, insinuating that desperation had driven her to fabricate. Elena answered each question quietly but firmly. Each time they tried to twist her words, she returned to the same truth. My son exists. His eyes tell the story you want to bury. At one point, a lawyer leaned forward, voice sharp. Miss Carter, isn't it true you hope to elevate your station by seducing Mr. Holtson? Elena's breath caught, but she steadied herself. She thought of Caleb, of his tiny hand clutching her finger, of his trust. She met the lawyer's gaze head on. No, I never sought his station. I sought dignity. For myself. For my son. And I will not let you strip that away. The room fell silent for a beat. Even Travis's expression faltered, a flicker of unease breaking through. When it was finally over, Elena left the building drained, but unbroken. Outside, the camera swarmed again. Questions hurled into the cold air. She shielded her face. But one question made her pause. Miss Carter, why endure all this? Why not take the money and walk away? She turned, her eyes fierce despite the exhaustion. Because money fades, but truth lasts. And my son deserves truth. The words hit headlines within the hour. Truth lasts. Elena Carter speaks out. That night, back in her apartment, Elena rocked Caleb to sleep, her mother watching from the doorway. You were brave today, her mother whispered. Elena kissed the top of Caleb's head. I was terrified. Mama, but fear doesn't mean silence. Not anymore. She wrote in her journal before bed. They tried to break me. They tried to bury us in doubt. But we are still standing, and the world is starting to see. The fight was far from over. Travis still wielded power, money, and influence. But for the first time, Elena felt the tide shifting, however slightly, and in Caleb's storm-gray eyes, she saw not just the reflection of his father, but the promise of a truth that could no longer be denied. The weeks following the deposition were a blur of headlines, protests, and whispered conversations in quiet corners. Elena Carter had expected the legal process to be grueling, but she hadn't anticipated how much the public would seize upon every detail. Every time she turned on the television, there was her face, sometimes sympathetic, sometimes ridiculed. Caleb's photograph appeared in magazines, his storm-gray eyes magnified until they seemed to stare into the conscience of the nation. One night, as snow fell outside her window, Elena sat on the couch. Caleb nestled against her chest. Her mother crocheted silently nearby, the click of her needles filling the room. The news anchor's voice drifted from the television. In the latest twist, anonymous sources within Holtson Global suggest the board is growing uneasy with Travis Holtson's handling of the scandal. Share prices dropped another 6% today, with investors citing concerns about reputational risk. Her mother set down her needles. See that even his own people are wavering. Elena traced the curve of Caleb's cheek. It doesn't feel like victory yet. It feels like we're just waiting for the next blow. The next blow came soon enough. 2 days later, Elena received a letter from Holtson's lawyers. A settlement offer $8 million. Confidentiality guaranteed. The letter was polished, professional, and cold. Karen Lou laid the document on the table between them. This is their way of saying they're nervous. But Elena, it comes with strings. You'd be silenced forever. Elena shook her head before Karen finished. I don't want their money. I want my son to know I didn't sell his truth. Karen's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Then we fight on. Meanwhile, Daniel Reeve, the journalist who had first shared the incriminating emails, published another bombshell piece. He revealed a series of internal memos in which Holtson executives openly discussed managing optics and neutralizing Carter through intimidation. The article spread like wildfire. Commentators on every major network debated not just Holtson's guilt, but the broader pattern: how many other women had been silenced by settlements and threats? How many stories had never reached the light? At a rally in Union Square, hundreds gathered with candles. They chanted Elena's name, but she stayed home, watching from her apartment window as the glow of their candles lit the night sky. I never asked to be anyone's symbol, she whispered to Caleb, rocking him gently, but maybe we don't get to choose when truth calls us. The pressure on Travis Holtson grew. Once untouchable, he now faced whispers in the halls of power. His friends distanced themselves, invitations dried up, and rumors swirled that the Holtson Global Board was considering options for leadership transition. Behind closed doors, Travis fumed. He hurled glasses against walls, shouted at advisors, and demanded loyalty. But even in his rage, he couldn't escape Caleb's eyes. Every time he saw the child's picture in the press, he felt a crack in his armor. For Elena, the strain took its toll. Nights were sleepless, her dreams haunted by courtroom battles and shadowy figures threatening her child. She found herself praying more often not for victory, but for strength. One evening, as she paced the floor with Caleb, her mother stopped her gently. You need to rest. You can't carry all of this alone. Elena shook her head. If I fall, Mama, what happens to him? What happens to us? You won't fall, her mother said firmly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Because you're not alone. You have me. You have Karen. You even have strangers out there holding candles for you. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She had always thought of herself as ordinary, invisible, yet now, somehow, she had become the center of a storm. Then, another twist: a former employee of Holtson Global came forward, offering testimony. Her name was Lydia Brown, a former executive assistant who had worked closely with Travis. In a televised interview, Lydia claimed she had seen the hush money memo drafted personally under Travis's direction. He knew, Lydia said firmly. He knew the child was his, and his first instinct wasn't to step up, it was to bury the truth. The interview aired during prime time. Elena watched with her mother, clutching Caleb tightly. Karen called within minutes. This changes everything. Lydia's testimony corroborates the documents. The jury won't just hear your voice, they'll hear his own people turning against him. For the first time, Elena felt a flicker of hope, not just for justice, but for the possibility of healing. Still, the path ahead was steep. Court dates loomed, and every day brought new waves of scrutiny. But as winter deepened, something shifted in the air. It was no longer just Elena against Travis. It was Elena and a chorus of voices demanding truth. Women, men, mothers, fathers, strangers who saw in her story their own silenced pain. And Travis Holtson, once untouchable, stood on the edge of a reckoning he could no longer control. The courthouse stood like a fortress of stone and glass, its steps crowded with reporters, protesters, and onlookers bracing against the sharp wind of early March. Elena Carter clutched Caleb's blanket tighter around him as she stepped out of the car, Karen Lou at her side. Her mother followed just behind, steadying her with a hand on her back. The sea of cameras erupted. "Elena, do you believe justice will be served? Is this about money or truth? Do you think Holtson will admit it on the stand?" Elena kept her gaze forward, repeating silently, "For Caleb, for truth, inside." The marble hallways echoed with the sound of footsteps. The trial had drawn national attention, transforming a paternity dispute into a referendum on power, privilege, and the silencing of women. In the courtroom, Travis Holtson sat with his team of lawyers, his tailored suit impeccable, his expression carefully controlled. But even from across the room, Elena saw the tightness around his eyes, the faint twitch of his jaw. Judge Morales, a stern woman with silver hair pulled into a bun, called the court to order. The jury filed in 12 strangers whose faces would soon become familiar to Elena. 12 people who would decide whether truth could triumph over power. Karen delivered her opening statement with calm conviction. This case is not about money. It is about accountability. It is about a man who used his power to deny a child's existence and to silence the woman who bore him. The evidence will show that Caleb Carter is the biological son of Travis Holtson. But more than that, it will show the lengths to which Mr. Holtson went to hide that truth. When it was the defense's turn, their lead attorney, a tall man named Richard Kent, rose smoothly. His voice carried the polished confidence of decades in high-stakes litigation. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is built on stories and speculation. My client is a respected businessman, a philanthropist. Miss Carter seeks attention, notoriety, and financial gain. We will show that she has manipulated public opinion and fabricated claims to elevate herself." Elena sat still, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She could feel the jury's eyes on her, weighing her against the words spoken. The first witnesses took the stand. Daniel Reeve testified about the leaked emails, his voice steady under cross-examination. Lydia Brown followed, recounting the hush money memo and her direct knowledge of Travis's involvement. Each word she spoke carved cracks in the defense's wall of denial. Travis avoided Elena's gaze, scribbling notes furiously or whispering to his attorneys. When it was Elena's turn, she walked slowly to the witness stand, her knees trembling but her back straight. She placed her hand on the Bible, swore to tell the truth, and took her seat. Karen's questions were gentle, guiding her through her story, her years of service at the estate, her relationship with Travis, the night she told him about her pregnancy, his denial, the birth of Caleb, the threats and settlement offers. Elena spoke quietly but clearly, her voice cracking only when she described holding Caleb for the first time and knowing he would grow up with questions she couldn't answer alone. When Karen finished, the courtroom was silent. Even the reporters had stopped scribbling. Then Richard Kent rose for cross-examination. His tone was sharp, his words chosen to cut. "Miss Carter, isn't it true you continued working at the Holtson estate even after claiming mistreatment?" "Yes," Elena replied softly. "Because I needed the job. Because survival isn't always a choice." Kent pressed harder. "You expect this jury to believe that a billionaire would risk everything for a relationship with his maid." Elena's eyes flickered to Caleb in her mother's arms at the back of the courtroom. Then she turned back to the lawyer. "I expect this jury to believe the truth, whether it's convenient or not." A ripple of murmurs passed through the room. The judge struck her gavel once, calling for order. Kent's face tightened. No further questions. When Elena stepped down, her mother reached for her hand, squeezing it with quiet pride. As the trial moved forward, experts testified. A geneticist explained the near certainty of Caleb's paternity. the DNA evidence stark and undeniable. A child psychologist spoke of the importance of identity, of knowing one's roots. Each testimony built the scaffolding of a case that was no longer just about one man and one woman, but about a society wrestling with its own conscience. Outside the courthouse, rallies swelled larger each day. Some carried signs with Caleb's photo, others chanted for accountability, for justice, for truth. Candlelight vigils stretched into the night, their glow visible from Elena's apartment window. Inside, Travis's mask began to slip. His temper flared when Lydia testified, his hand slamming against the table before his lawyer calmed him. Jurors noticed. Reporters noticed. The image of the composed billionaire was fraying. On the fifth day, as court adjourned, Karen leaned close to Elena. "We're making progress. But be ready. They'll put him on the stand soon. And that's when this will turn." Elena nodded, though her stomach twisted with dread. She knew Travis would fight with everything he had. But she also knew the truth had begun to breathe, to grow, to shine through cracks money couldn't seal. That night, she wrote in her journal, "Tomorrow, he will speak, and the world will see whether a man can bury truth with lies, or whether truth can still rise." The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the clerk announced the next witness. Cameras clicked, pens scratched across notebooks, and the air tightened with expectancy. All eyes turned toward Travis Holtson as he rose from his chair, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate calm. He walked to the witness stand with measured steps, though Elena Carter noticed the stiffness in his shoulders, the faint tremor in his jaw. He swore his oath and sat, staring straight ahead, avoiding the eyes of the jury, the reporters, and most of all, hers. Richard Kent, his lead attorney, approached first. "Mr. Holtson, for the record, please state your full name and occupation." "Travis James Holtson, CEO of Holtson Global Enterprises." Kent nodded, his tone smooth. "You are a man of considerable accomplishments." "Are you not?" Travis gave a tight smile. "Yes. I've built an international company, provided thousands of jobs, and contributed millions to charity." "And do you have any children?" Travis's eyes flickered briefly, then steadied. "No, I do not." A ripple of murmurs moved through the gallery. Elena felt her chest clench, but she stayed still, her gaze fixed on him. Kent continued, guiding him gently through a portrait of respectability, his philanthropic endeavors, his leadership, his spotless reputation. Each answer painted him as a man too dignified, too disciplined, to commit the betrayal Elena had described. When Kent finished, he offered a small nod to the jury, as if to say, "See, this is the man before you." Then it was Karen Lou's turn. She rose slowly, her papers neatly arranged, her eyes unwavering. She approached the witness stand with the calm of a surgeon preparing for an incision. "Mr. Holtson," she began evenly, "you testified that you have no children. Is that correct?" "Yes," he said firmly. Karen picked up a folder from the table. "Exhibit 14, a genetic report conducted under court order showing a 99.98% probability that you are the biological father of Caleb Carter. Are you suggesting this report is false?" Travis's jaw tightened. "I question the validity of the process." "Questioning the process does not change the result. Mr. Holtson." Karen's voice sharpened. "This jury has heard from experts who verified the chain of custody and the accuracy of the tests. What they have not heard is a reason why you continue to deny your own son." Travis shifted in his seat. "Because I don't believe. Karen interrupted. "Or don't want to believe. Which is it, Mr. Holtson?" The courtroom hummed with energy. The judge struck her gavel once, reminding counsel to maintain order. Karen leaned closer, her tone steady but unrelenting. "Mr. Holtson, we've seen internal emails from your company discussing how to silence Miss Carter. We've heard from Lydia Brown, your former assistant, that you personally directed a hush-money memo. Do you deny those actions?" Travis swallowed hard. "I don't recall. Let me refresh your memory." Karen slid another paper toward the clerk. "This is your signature on the memo, is it not?" Travis hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Yes." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Karen's voice dropped lower, quieter, but sharper than before. "So you admit you tried to buy silence, not because Miss Carter lied, but because you feared the truth. Isn't that correct?" Travis's face reddened. "I was protecting my company, my reputation, and in doing so, you denied your child." The words hung heavy in the air. The jury shifted uncomfortably, eyes darting between the lawyer, the witness, and the infant in the gallery. Karen let the silence linger before speaking again. "Mr. Holtson, would you look at Caleb Carter? Look at him now." For the first time, Travis's gaze moved across the room. Elena's mother held Caleb in her arms, the baby wide awake, his storm-gray eyes staring curiously at the man on the stand. Travis faltered, his lips parted, but no words came. The resemblance was undeniable. The same piercing eyes, the same intensity. The courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Reporters leaned forward, pens frozen mid-scribble. Karen's voice was soft now, almost a whisper. "Do you still deny him?" Travis tore his gaze away, anger flashing across his face. "This is manipulation," he snapped. "You're exploiting a child." Karen straightened, her expression unreadable. "No, Mr. Holtson, you exploited silence. You exploited power. But you cannot exploit truth. Truth stands on its own, even when denied." The judge called for order as voices rose in the gallery. Travis's mask was slipping his defensiveness, his fury, his loss of control all plain to see. When the session adjourned, reporters swarmed outside, their questions louder, sharper, more damning than before. Headlines blared within hours. Holtson cracks on the stand, the eyes that broke the billionaire's denial. Back at her apartment, Elena rocked Caleb gently, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. Her mother placed a hand on her shoulder. "He saw him," her mother whispered. "He couldn't hide from it anymore." Elena nodded, pressing her cheek against Caleb's soft hair. "He can deny me. He can deny the world. But he can't deny those eyes." That night, Elena opened her journal and wrote today. Truth stared into lies, and lies blinked first. The day after Travis Holtson's testimony, the courthouse felt different. The crowd outside had doubled, stretching down the block, their signs sharper, their chants louder. What had begun as curiosity had transformed into a movement. People weren't only here for Elena Carter anymore. They were here for every story like hers that had been buried under money and fear. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. Even the bailiff, usually impassive, seemed uneasy as he called the court to order. Elena sat at the plaintiff's table, Caleb in her mother's arms in the gallery. She could feel the energy vibrating through the room, as though truth itself were pressing against the walls, demanding release. Karen Liu rose first to call her next witness, a financial analyst who had examined Holtson Global's internal ledgers. The man adjusted his glasses nervously, but his voice carried clearly. Over the last year, there were multiple cash transfers labeled as discretionary expenses, The amounts totaled nearly $10 million. The timing coincides with when Miss Carter gave birth and when public rumors first surfaced. Karen leaned in. And in your expert opinion, were these payments consistent with legitimate business expenses? No, the analyst replied firmly. They appear to be attempts at concealment. The defense objected, but Judge Morales overruled. The jury scribbled furiously in their notebooks. When it was the defense's turn, Richard Kent tried to poke holes, but each question only highlighted the glaring inconsistencies. For the first time, Travis himself seemed smaller, shoulders hunched, eyes darting, lips pressed tight. Then Karen called her final witness Elena's mother. The older woman walked slowly to the stand, her hands clasped in front of her. She swore her oath and sat, her posture proud despite the tremor in her voice. Karen asked softly, "Can you tell the court what you saw the day your grandson was born?" Tears welled in the woman's eyes. "I saw my daughter bring life into the world. I saw Caleb open his eyes. And I thought, Lord, those are not my family's eyes. Those are his father's eyes." She turned, her gaze locking on Travis. "And I will not stand here and pretend I didn't see what I saw." The gallery erupted in murmurs. Caleb gurgled softly in her lap, unaware that his very existence had become the fulcrum of justice. Karen's final words echoed in the hushed room. This case is not about vengeance. It is about dignity. It is about the right of a child to be acknowledged, and the duty of a man, no matter how powerful, to face the truth. When the court adjourned that afternoon, Elena stepped outside into a wall of sound. Supporters chanted her name. Others held candles even in daylight, their flames flickering in the wind. For the first time, Elena didn't shy away from the cameras. She held Caleb in her arms, raised him gently, and let the world see his eyes. The image spread within hours, Elena on the courthouse steps, Caleb in her arms, both framed by a sea of light. Headlines declared it the photograph of the year. Social media erupted with hashtags, Nash, Truth, Has Eyes, Justice for Caleb, Holtson Reckoning. Meanwhile, in the penthouse of his luxury tower, Travis stared at the image on his screen. No matter how many times he clicked away, it returned on the news, on his phone, in the silence of his thoughts. His reflection in the window merged with Caleb's face on the screen. Storm-gray eyes staring back at him, undeniable. He hurled the tablet across the room, shattering it against the marble floor. But the image stayed. He could no longer control the narrative. Back in her apartment, Elena sat quietly with her mother. The adrenaline of the day had left her drained, but something inside her felt lighter. Her mother placed a hand on hers. "Do you see, baby? The truth isn't just ours anymore. It belongs to everyone who believes." Elena nodded slowly. She looked down at Caleb, whose tiny fingers clutched her blouse. "He'll grow up knowing we didn't stay silent. That matters." Later that night, Daniel Reeve called. His voice buzzed with urgency. "Elena, my sources say the Holtson Global Board is preparing an emergency meeting. They're considering removing Travis. This trial isn't just about your case anymore. It's shaking his empire." Elena closed her eyes, exhaustion mixing with disbelief. All I ever wanted was for Caleb to be seen. Now the whole world is watching. The following day, newspapers carried a new headline: Boardroom Crisis at Holtson Global. Investors were fleeing, regulators were circling, and whispers of criminal investigations began to surface. In the courthouse, the atmosphere shifted further. It no longer felt like Elena on trial against a billionaire. It felt like an empire unraveling in real time. truth clawing its way to the surface despite every attempt to smother it. When Karen rested her case, she turned to Elena and whispered, "We've given them the truth. Now it's in their hands." Elena nodded, tears stinging her eyes. She didn't know what the jury would decide, but she knew something deeper. Silence had broken, and once broken, it could not be rebuilt. The courthouse had become a theater of anticipation. Each morning the steps filled before sunrise, reporters angling for spots, supporters holding candles even in daylight, counter-protesters with their sneers and signs. By the time Elena Carter arrived, the chant shook the marble columns. She carried Caleb against her chest, his small head tucked beneath her chin, while her mother shielded them both with her steady arm. Inside, the atmosphere was taut as a drawn bow. The defense had begun presenting its case, but its strength was unraveling. Richard Kent called a series of witnesses executives from Holtson Global, longtime associates of Travis Holtson. They painted him as disciplined, charitable, incapable of impropriety. But under cross-examination, cracks emerged. Karen Liu exposed contradictions, reminding the jury of the hush money memo, the financial irregularities, the testimony of Lydia Brown. Each defense witness faltered, their certainty shrinking under the weight of documented truth. On the fourth day of defense testimony, Kent made his boldest move. He called a woman named Veronica Steele, a socialite known for her sharp tongue and her frequent presence at charity galas. She claimed Elena had bragged about catching a rich man and securing her future through Caleb. Gas filled the gallery. Elena felt her throat tighten, her pulse pounding. She wanted to leap from her seat, to deny it, but Karen's hand pressed gently against her arm. "Wait." When Karen rose for cross-examination, her calm cut like glass. "Miss Steele, how often do you attend Holtson Global events several times a year?" Veronica replied smoothly. "And do you benefit financially from Mr. Holtson's donations?" A pause. "Aye. My foundation has received support." "Yes." "So your relationship with him is not merely social, it's financial." Veronica shifted in her seat. Karen pressed on. "Do you have recordings, messages, or any evidence that Miss Carter ever made such statements?" "No," Veronica admitted reluctantly. "Then what you offer is hearsay, colored by your financial ties to the defendant. Thank you. No further questions." The jury's faces hardened. By the time Veronica left the stand, the defense's strategy looked thin, desperate. Outside, the tide swelled further. Candlelight vigils grew into marches. Chants of truth for Caleb echoed across the city. Even late-night comedians, once mocking, now targeted Travis, portraying him as a symbol of arrogance brought low. In the penthouse of his tower, Travis raged. He berated Kent, demanded stronger tactics, threatened lawsuits against the press. But in quieter moments, when the shouting stopped, he found himself haunted by those storm-gray eyes. He could dismiss the witnesses, denounce Elena, even rage against the jury. But he could not escape the gaze of the boy who bore his face. For Elena, the days blurred together. She woke each morning with knots in her stomach, bracing for fresh attacks. Yet each night, when she rocked Caleb to sleep, she felt a strange calm. His tiny breaths, his warmth against her chest, they reminded her why she endured. Her mother, steadfast as ever, whispered words of strength. "You've come too far to falter now. Let them throw stones. The truth is your shield." Karen met with her late one evening, papers spread across the table. "We've dismantled their case, but juries can be unpredictable. I need you prepared for either outcome." Elena nodded slowly. "I've already won. Karen, Caleb will grow up knowing I didn't stay silent." Karen studied her for a long moment before smiling faintly. That's what terrifies them most. You're not fighting for money. You're fighting for dignity. And dignity doesn't settle. As closing arguments loomed, tension crackled like static in the courtroom. Kent gave his performance first, his voice booming as he urged the jury not to be swayed by emotion and spectacle. He painted Elena as opportunistic, driven by ambition rather than truth. When he finished, the room seemed to exhale, waiting for Karen. She rose slowly, walked to the jury box, and let silence linger. Then she spoke, her tone low but resolute. This case has been called many things: a scandal, a distraction, a spectacle. But at its core, it is something far simpler. A child was born. A man denied him. And the truth stood, unshaken, through every attempt to bury it. She gestured gently toward Caleb in his grandmother's arms. That child will grow up one day and ask, did the world acknowledge me? Did it tell me I mattered? Your verdict will answer him. The room was still, the words hanging like weight in the air. Karen's final phrase rang out clear. Truth is not for sale. Dignity is not for sale. And justice cannot be denied. When the jury retired to deliberate, the courtroom emptied into a sea of voices outside. Elena stood at the courthouse steps, Caleb in her arms, the crowd roaring her name. She did not speak. There was nothing left to say. The truth was no longer hers alone. As night fell, candles lit the city once more. In apartments and living rooms across the country, families watched, waiting. Some saw themselves in Elena's struggle. Others saw their own silence mirrored in Travis's denial. The trial had become more than a case. It was a mirror held up to a nation. Elena sat awake, writing in her journal as Caleb slept. Tomorrow, they will speak. And whatever they say, we have already shown the world silence does not win. The courthouse was silent when the jury returned. The crowd outside had grown so large that barricades lined the street. Officers holding back reporters and supporters who chanted Elena Carter's name and held up candles even under the noon sun. The trial had stopped being only about paternity. It had become a referendum on power, on truth, on the dignity denied to so many. Inside, Elena sat at the plaintiff's table with Karen Liu at her side. Her mother held Caleb in the gallery, the baby swaddled tightly, his storm-gray eyes open and curious. Elena clasped her hands together so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her heart pounded against her ribs, each beat echoing in her ears. Judge Morales banged her gavel. Court is in session. Bring in the jury. 12 men and women filed back into the box. Their faces were unreadable, their eyes heavy with the weight of responsibility. Elena searched for signs, any flicker of compassion, any glance of reassurance, but found only silence. The foreman, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes, rose when called. She held a slip of paper in her hands, the words that would decide not only Elena's case, but her son's legacy. On the matter of paternity, the judge intoned, do you, the jury, find that Mr. Travis Holtson is the biological father of Caleb Carter? The foreman's voice was steady. We do. A collective gasp swept through the room. Elena's breath caught, tears blurring her vision. Her mother clutched Caleb tighter, whispering prayers under her breath. Judge Morales nodded. And on the matter of damages sought by the plaintiff, how do you find? The foreman glanced at the paper. We award in favor of the plaintiff, Miss Carter, recognizing Mr. Holtson's willful denial and attempted concealment, compensatory and punitive damages to be determined in accordance with state law. Elena covered her mouth with trembling hands. She wasn't thinking of the money, She was thinking of Caleb, of the day he would grow old enough to ask who he was, and of the answer she could now give him without hesitation. Across the courtroom, Travis Holtson sat rigid, his jaw clenched, his face pale. The veneer of control that had carried him through years of empire and influence cracked before the cameras. For the first time, the world saw not a titan, but a man undone. The gallery erupted in cries, some cheering, others weeping. Reporters scribbled furiously. Cameras clicked in rapid bursts. Judge Morales pounded her gavel for order, but the moment was larger than her courtroom. When adjournment was declared, Elena turned toward her mother. She crossed the room, took Caleb into her arms, and pressed her lips to his soft hair. He looked up at her with those piercing eyes, and for the first time, she whispered the words she had been waiting to say, "He can never deny you again." Outside, the steps of the courthouse were a sea of humanity. Thousands had gathered, chanting, holding signs, weeping openly as Elena emerged. The roar of voices rose into the winter air. She paused at the top of the steps, Caleb in her arms, her mother at her side. Karen stood just behind her, steady and proud. For a moment, Elena hesitated. She was just a maid, an ordinary woman thrust into an extraordinary storm. But the faces before her were waiting, not for a hero, but for the truth. She lifted Caleb gently, his small hand waving unconsciously. The crowd erupted in cheers, the sound rolling like thunder down the street. Elena did not speak into microphones or deliver rehearsed lines. She simply held her son and let the world see the eyes that had carried them to this moment. That night, the photograph spread across the globe. It appeared on the front page of every major newspaper, splashed across television screens, plastered on billboards and timelines. The eyes that couldn't be denied read one headline. Another declared justice for Caleb, justice for truth, in his penthouse. Travis sat alone, the city lights stretching endlessly beyond the glass. His phone buzzed with calls he ignored, messages from board members demanding his resignation, from lawyers warning of criminal investigations. The empire he had built, brick by brick, was crumbling not because of hostile competitors or economic collapse, but because of a child's eyes he could no longer escape. For Elena, the victory was bittersweet. She returned home with Caleb and her mother, the weight of exhaustion pressing heavy on her bones. The cameras followed. The world clamored for her words, but she closed the door and sat quietly in her living room, holding her son close. Her mother brewed tea, the familiar scent filling the air. "It's over, baby," she whispered. "You did it." Elena shook her head slowly. "It's not over, Mama. Not yet. But it's enough for today." She opened her journal, writing with a steady hand. Today, the world said his name. Caleb Carter, my son, our truth. And no one can take that away. For the first time in months, she slept deeply. Caleb cradled against her chest, her mother's hand resting gently on her shoulder. Outside, the city glowed with candles, 1,000 tiny flames carrying their story into the night. The morning after the verdict, New York felt changed. The streets buzzed not only with the noise of traffic, but with the murmur of a story that had seeped into every cafe, every subway car, every living room. Strangers spoke Elena Carter's name as though she were a neighbor, someone who had lived in their building all along. The maid who had taken on a billionaire had become something larger, a mirror of resilience, a reminder that truth could pierce even the tallest towers. Elena woke to the sound of Caleb's laughter. For weeks his cries had been the soundtrack of her mornings. but now his giggles spilled like sunlight through the apartment. She rose slowly, still exhausted from the trial, and found her mother cradling him near the window. "Look at him," her mother whispered. "He knows." Elena smiled faintly. "Knows what, that his name is safe? That the world will never erase him." The phone rang nonstop that day. News anchors wanted exclusive interviews. Book agents called with offers. Foundations asked her to speak at conferences. Karen Lou advised her to rest. But Elena felt a deeper pull. She hadn't fought just for herself, or even for Caleb alone. The verdict had tapped into something wider, a hunger for stories that affirmed dignity in the face of denial. By afternoon, Elena held a press conference in the small community center where she had once folded clothes for struggling families. Cameras packed the narrow room, reporters jostling for space. But Elena didn't step to the podium in designer clothes or rehearsed lines. She wore her plain navy dress, her hair tied back. Caleb balanced on her hip. "I was never meant to stand here," she began softly, her voice carrying despite the hush. "I was a maid. I cleaned rooms. I washed sheets. I sang lullabies to my child in the dark. When I was denied, I thought silence was my only option. But silence is where injustice grows." Her eyes swept the crowd. "I am not the first woman this has happened to. I will not be the last. But today, I hope no one forgets that dignity is not something given by the powerful. It is carried in our bones, in our blood, in the eyes of our children." She paused, her voice thickening. "Caleb will grow up knowing his truth. And I pray every child black, poor, invisible, knows theirs too." The room erupted in applause. Outside, the cheers echoed down the block, carried into the city like a hymn. Meanwhile, Travis Holtson's empire fractured. Board members convened emergency meetings, their faces pale under fluorescent lights. Sponsors pulled out of partnerships. Investors demanded resignations. Newspapers ran headlines of corporate collapse from titan to tragedy. Travis remained holed up in his penthouse, refusing interviews, pacing the marble floors like a caged animal. In quieter moments, he stared at photographs of himself from magazine covers, wondering how swiftly power could evaporate. And always, when he closed his eyes, he saw Caleb. Those storm-gray eyes haunted him, reminding him that denial had not destroyed the child, but destroyed himself. For Karen Lou, the case cemented her legacy. Law schools invited her to lecture. Young attorneys called her their role model. But when asked what victory meant to her, she answered simply that Caleb will never have to prove he exists again. In the weeks that followed, Elena found herself embraced by communities she had never met. Churches invited her to speak. Advocacy groups offered platforms. Mothers whispered their own stories into her ear. Stories of silence. Stories of survival. Elena listened to them all, her heart both heavy and light. But at home, life returned to its quiet rhythms. She cooked dinner with her mother, rocked Caleb to sleep, folded laundry with tired but steady hands. Some nights she sat by the window, writing in her journal. "The world sees me now, but I must remain who I am, a mother, a woman who chose truth over silence." Months passed. The city's frenzy faded into memory, though the photograph of Elena lifting Caleb remained iconic, hung in galleries, printed on posters. Journalists called it the picture of a generation. On Caleb's first birthday, Elena hosted a small gathering in the park. Just a few friends, neighbors, and Karen. They spread a blanket under a tree, placed a single candle on a cupcake, and sang softly as Caleb clapped his hands. Elena held him close as the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold. She whispered, "You are seen. You are loved, and nothing can erase you." Her mother squeezed her shoulder. Karen raised a glass of sparkling cider. "To Caleb," she said, "and to the truth that endures." In that moment, Elena felt the ache of all she had endured ease into something gentler. The world was not perfect. Injustice still walked the streets. Denial still found new victims. But for her son, for their story, there was light. The legacy of the case rippled outward. Nonprofits launched scholarships in Caleb's name. Universities hosted panels on dignity and power. The phrase "eyes that couldn't be denied" became shorthand for resilience in the face of injustice. And though Elena never sought the spotlight, she accepted her role with quiet grace. If our story keeps even one child from being erased, she told an interviewer, then it was worth every tear. On a cool spring evening, Elena walked home with Caleb asleep in his stroller. The city hummed around them, taxis, laughter, distant music. She paused at a mural painted on the side of a building. Her own face, lifting Caleb toward the sky, candles glowing beneath. At the bottom, in bold letters, were words she had once written in her journal. "Silence does not win." Elena bent down, kissed Caleb's forehead, and whispered, "We are free." The story had ended in the courtroom, but its legacy would carry on in her son's laughter, in the chants of strangers, in the eyes that had turned the world toward truth. At its heart, this story teaches us something timeless. Dignity is not a gift others can grant. It is something we must claim, even when the world denies us. Elena's fight was not only about proving paternity, it was about ensuring her son would never grow up erased, never doubt that his life had value. For many older viewers, her journey may echo moments from their own lives, times when silence seemed easier than speaking up, when fear outweighed courage. But the lesson is clear. Silence protects no one. Truth, though costly, leaves behind a legacy that outlives shame. We all face choices between quiet suffering and brave honesty. Elena's story reminds us that courage is not loud, it is steady, it is maternal. It is the refusal to let injustice define the future. And while power, money, or status may dominate for a time, nothing is stronger than the human spirit determined to protect what it loves. So let us carry this reminder. We are never too old, never too powerless, to choose truth over silence. Our dignity, and the dignity of those we love, depends on it. Thank you for watching and sharing this journey with us. If this story moved you, please give it a like. Share it with someone who might find strength in it. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep telling stories that honor truth, dignity, and hope.